Hi there, welcome to Lilly-Tree. In this video we're making this multi-strand bracelet with wire wrapped connector. And if you want to see more techniques and tutorials like this one, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get wrapping. The wirework connector in this bracelet helps to keep the strands separated and can be adjusted to the width of bracelet you want. The connector can also be used in multi-strand necklaces. To make this bracelet, you need 1mm diameter copper wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge, a hook clasp and jump rings for the fastening, and a selection of beads. I've got some smoky quartz, moonstone, coated pyrite, and coloured pearls, but you could use whatever you want. And the tools you need are your bell making pliers if you've got some, round nose pliers, flat nose pliers, nylon jaw pliers will be useful, your wire cutters and an awl. We're going to start by making the connector, and for this we need 3 pieces of the 1mm diameter or 18 gauge wire. I want my finished connector to be about 1 inch long, so I'm starting with 3 inch long pieces of wire. And I'm going to start by creating the centre loops on the connector. So I'll take one of the outside wires and position the smallest step on my bell making pliers in the centre of that wire. Then I'll bend each end of the wire up, and if you're in the centre those wires should be the same length so you can adjust it if necessary. Then I'll continue bending those wires around to create a full loop. And you want the wire to be sitting in a continuous line either side of that loop. Then I'll do exactly the same with the second wire. So I'll have the top wire with the centre loop, the centre straight wire, and the bottom wire with a centre loop. And you'll notice that I've made the loops in the same way, so the wire sitting on top coming out of the loops is facing in opposite directions. This is just a design choice and you could have them in the same direction if you want. We're now ready to start the weaving, and I've got 1 metre of the 0.4mm diameter or 26 gauge wire here. That's more than I'll need. I'm expecting to use around about 75 or 80 centimetres, but I can use the excess for the bead links later anyway. And I'm going to start in the centre of the link, so I want to start in the centre of the weaving wire. And I'm going to coil a couple of times around that centre wire. Then I'll add in my lower wire and take the wire twice over the top of both wires, and then through between them. I can then add in my top wire and take the wire twice over the top 2 wires, and then up through between them. And it might help if you just bend the ends of the outer wires out a bit. Then I'll go over the lower 2 wires twice, and make sure you compress the weave as you go. Then I'll weave over the top 2 wires twice, and I'll continue this 2-2 weave for as far as I want. So I've got 7 sets of wraps done now, and I'm quite happy with the length that that's created. What you'll probably find with this weave is that it tends to squeeze the centre wire out to the back. So to flatten that back out and settle the wires, I'm just going to use my nylon jaw pliers to clamp gently over the weave. If you haven't got nylon jaw pliers, you could use your flat nose pliers for this, but just be careful not to mar the metal. And just to finish the weaving off this side, I'm going to coil that weaving wire a few times around the centre frame wire. I will be continuing this coil later, so it doesn't matter how many times. And now's a good time to make sure those loops line up, so I'll just use my flat nose pliers to pull that top wire out a little bit. And then we're ready to weave the other side. Now I can't start the 2-2 weave until I get past those loops. So the first thing I'm going to do is just coil that middle wire to get past the loops. And then once I'm past that bottom loop, I'll take the wire twice over the middle and bottom wires, through between them, and then twice over the top 2 wires, and weave exactly the same number of times as I did for the first side. And settle those wires with nylon jaw pliers or flat nose pliers as before. Then we're ready to make the end loops of the connector. So I'll trim the upper and lower wires on both sides. I'm leaving the middle wire for embellishment later. Then I'll turn each of those ends to make a loop, using the same step on my bell making pliers as before. If you haven't got bell making pliers, you can use your round nose pliers for this. You just want to make sure all the loops are an even size. And you can check and adjust these loops until you're happy that they're sitting opposite each other and have the spacing you want. Now we're ready to make the embellishment using that middle wire. Now you can create whatever embellishment you want here. You could just make that wire into another small loop at the end, but I'm going to bend it over and curve it around a little bit. And I want to continue coiling the centre wire with the weaving wire as I go. And as I cross the centre wire underneath, I'm going to fix that embellishment in place by taking the weaving wire through the back. So I'll use my awl just to make a space for the wire. And then thread that weaving wire through. Take it over the centre frame wire and make another hole the other side to thread the wire back to the front. I can then continue the coil. I'm just going to finish my embellishment with a loop. So I'll use my round nose pliers and just manipulate that wire to where I want it. Then I can cut off the excess, and I think I'll just coil down to the bottom of that loop. Then I can carefully trim that weaving wire and use my nylon jaw pliers again to make sure that embellishment's flush with the base. Then I'll do exactly the same to create the embellishment on the other end. And that completes the connector. For this bracelet I've made 2 connectors and patinaed them with liver of sulphur. I'm then making bead link chains to go between them. All of my beads have small holes, so I'm using 0.4mm diameter or 26 gauge wire and making wrap loop links for each of them. If you want more details on making wrap links, you can check out my video, which I'll put in a card above and in the description below. I'm using 4 different gemstone beads in these chains, and I wanted them to be placed fairly randomly. I wanted to spend a bit of time explaining that design process, so I'm going to put that in another video, and I'll link that at the end of this one as soon as it's available. If you don't want to use a mix of beads, this bracelet will work equally well with the same bead in each of the links, or with the regular pattern of different beads. Deciding on that is part of the fun of the design process. If you're making links with wrap loops like these, don't forget to link them together as you're making the loops. And because the middle loop of the connector is also a closed loop, you'll need to add the chain onto the connector as you're making that final loop of the chain. This can be a little bit fiddly, but just wrap that loop carefully and you should be fine. The end loops on the connector are open loops, so you can finish the chains for those fully and then just open those connector loops to add them on. I add the 3 chains between the connectors to start with. Check that the lengths are even and adjust them if I need to. Then add the chains at each side. Then I'll carefully make sure each of those chains are straight before adding the hook on one end and the jump rings on the other. And that completes the multi-strand bracelet. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please click that like button below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.